Thank you very much, Joan. And special thanks to Mel. I just couldn't help but think what a kinder and gentler time it seemed to be in the mid 80s compared to now. That probably is a gloss of memory, but anyway, I really appreciated that. We're going to start out actually by going back even earlier than that. The date is June 1965. The place is Leeds, England. I am visiting people over there as kind of a student exchange, and I'm at a dance at Leeds Technical College. The group was, if I recall, Davy D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick, and Titch. That's the kind of groups you had in the 60s. I asked girl after girl to dance with me, and every single one of them declined. One even saying she preferred to dance with her sister. I was crestfallen. It gave this callow 18-year-old a different experience of exclusion than he had experienced in a long time. Fast forward to July 1975, a decade later. The place is Hays, Kansas. I'd arrived with a friend who had a meeting to attend. I had the whole day to myself. So I decided I would go to a bike shop and rent a bike. When I asked if I could do that, they brought out a 5-speed bike and a map. I was able to go all over town, to the fort, to Boot Hill, to the local pool. And when I brought the bike back and asked, how much do I owe you? They said, not a thing. Glad you had a good day visiting our town. Coming from the suspicious Boston, as I was astounded. So I think it's clear that all of us have been strangers and visitors and guests. All of us have stories, good and bad, about hospitality. But what is this radical hospitality? Where did that term come from? Well, I found out that it comes from the Benedictine monks. It's part of the order of Saint Benedict, patriarch of Western monks who lived in the 6th century. He wrote down how he believed a monastic community should function, including relations with one another and with the outside world. A book entitled Radical Hospitality, written by Father Daniel Homan, a monk from a Benedictine monastery in Michigan, and Lonnie Collins Pratt, a laywoman closely associated with that community, told me a lot more about this notion of radical hospitality. I think we live in an age when hospitality in some ways has been trivialized and commodified, made into yet another way to sell merchandise. Think of hospitality suites at hotel conferences, places for free food and drink, or Martha Stewart and the quest to be the perfect host or hostess. It was dramatically different from Middle Eastern culture in biblical times. Hospitality, how you were received as a stranger, could be a matter of life and death, not to be taken in. Treated well as a guest in the desert was to risk death. It's not surprising that being hospitable was so important in Hebrew scripture. You care about receiving others as guests because you know you will be a guest someday and you will want to be received as others have received you and you have received others. It's also true of 6th century Italy, Benedict's time, when traveling could be very dangerous and hospitality offered the travelers safe refuge. Hospitality was about saving lives, quite literally. As Father Homan says, radical hospitality is not about social graces, but about mutual reverence. Let me repeat that. Radical hospitality is not about social graces, but about mutual reverence. Hospitality is about establishing relationships. I sometimes worry if we talk about radical hospitality in the context of our congregations, we think of it as a kind of leverage point for growth, as if it were some sort of gimmick or technique that a congregation can master to lure people in and glom onto them. I think that's the antithesis of what radical hospitality is. The key is the word radical, from the word for root. Hospitality at the root, fundamental, from the core, from the heart, derived from the verb hospitare, to receive as a guest. And to receive as a guest about whom we actually give a damn, about whom we care. How do you teach people to care about others? How can you teach people to care about others? Saint Benedict thought so, which is why he established a community with rules to govern how they would be with one another and with outsiders. It's a key element of his vision. He wanted to teach people to care by leading them through years of wrestling with hospitality. As Father Holman wrote, Jesus said to love your neighbor. Hospitality is how. Radical hospitality is a fully embodied stance of openness and affirmation toward the other. That is, anyone who is not me. Toward people we think we know well, but in fact never really know completely. People like spouses and children and close friends. Toward casual acquaintances. And here's where it gets radical in the sense of championing extremes, countercultural views, openness towards strangers, people we don't know, people we have no experiential basis for trusting, and most radical of all, toward enemies, people we may have experiential basis for mistrusting. We live in a culture that seems to be increasingly suspicious of strangers, protective, fearful, defensive. We're told that we live in a time of constant war on a global scale, surrounded by people not to be trusted, enemies, terrorists, people who wish us ill or dead. We're being taught to maintain a state of constant vigilance, suspicion, and hostility toward our enemies, who could be anybody and everybody. Radical hospitality is the antithesis of such hostility. It sees the world and sees the stranger differently. But you say, there really are people out there who wish us ill, people who would injure, attack, destroy us. By what power will we best protect ourselves from these people? By acting as if everybody were out to get us? Seems to me that psychologists have a name for that. It's called paranoia, not a healthy state of mind. The monks of the Order of St. Benedict point us in the opposite direction. It's not about denying the possibility of danger. It's about acknowledging fear, facing fear, sitting with it. This is a spiritual approach to hospitality. Or go one step further, regard the stranger as if he or she might be the bearer of divine gifts. Treat the stranger in such a way that a relationship of trust can develop no matter where the encounter starts. In a world and time such as ours, radical hospitality is an act of faith, an act of intention, and an act of will. It's the stance that Abraham Lincoln took. The president once dropped a few kind words about the enemy. This is an account about Lincoln. They were human beings, were they not? One could not be completely remorseless even in war. The line must be drawn somewhere. An elderly woman in the reception room flashed a question. How could he speak kindly of his enemies when he should rather destroy them? What, madam, slowly, as he gazed into her face, Do I not destroy them when I make them my friends? There are several things to remember about radical hospitality. First, radical hospitality comes from deep inside us. It is not a superficial thing. It begins with self-affirmation, both your own capacity to be lovable and loved, but just as surely your capacity to love. Hospitality is about the comfort of being accepted and the challenge of accepting others. Love your neighbor as yourself. Second, radical hospitality is about inclusion and exclusion. It's about looking at each encounter with another person as a chance for us to act out of either inclusive or exclusive motives. Radical hospitality always sides with inclusion, always errs on the side of seeing in the other, the stranger, even the so-called enemy, a person of inherent worth and dignity, a child of God, if you will, just like yourself. Radical hospitality, third, is about staying open, not about controlling or manipulating or changing people to conform to our preconceived idea of what's good for them, but granting them the freedom to be who they are. In the process, we're more likely to learn something significant from them. As Father Homan says, the stranger helps us locate our favorite lives. The stranger helps us see the absurd in our culture and ourselves. The stranger opens our eyes. Fourth, radical hospitality is about giving another person your full attention and treating them with kindness. It's about active listening from the heart, switching the focus from yourself to the other. He tells a story of a child at home, ill, staying with a babysitter while the mom was at work. The mother called to say she loved him and was with him even when they were apart. But mommy, I want someone in skin. That's what we long for too, genuine connection with someone in skin. Perhaps now, at the end of these 2 years of pandemic, now more than ever, do we long for someone in skin. Fifth, radical hospitality is about understanding, acceptance, and intimacy. Acceptance helps us all discover our true selves. Father Homan asserts that intimacy is the goal of hospitality. In our culture, unfortunately, red flags go up since intimacy is so closely linked with sex. But intimacy, more broadly, is mutual reverence. Mutual reverence. Hospitality is a call to revere what is sacred in every person. Building a community in which radical hospitality is the rule is not easy. Ask any member of the monks in Michigan, or any member of this congregation, or the congregations that I've served. We have a hard time holding on to self-affirmation. We have a hard time risking trust, as often as our trust has been betrayed and we have been hurt, sometimes deeply hurt. We get too busy to take the time to pay attention and to listen from the heart. We sometimes don't like other people very much, and it's hard to be hospitable to people who irritate us. We're afraid of other people. We're afraid of ourselves. There's a story from radical hospitality that illustrates the challenges and the promise. Here's how it goes. There's a woman in line behind another shopper who is uneasy with the young man bagging her purchases. The guy was probably 35, but mentally perhaps closer to 12 or 13. Blonde, short, wide smile, and a scar across his face. His name badge read Kevin. Kevin asked, "Are you in a hurry today?" The shopper looked at The woman ringing up her order smiled faintly and commented how long the lines were. Kevin asked, "You have a lot of pop here. Are you going to have company?" The woman, frantic, look in her eyes, turned to look behind her. The other shopper said, "You do have a lot of pop." She explained that her grandson was turning 14 and the pop was for his party. "My sister had a birthday party," Kevin said. He drooled on one of the pop bottles. The other shopper responded, "I'll bet it was a lot of fun." Then the woman buying pop for her grandson's party did a courageous thing. It was so brave you wanted to cry for her. She turned toward Kevin, took a breath, looked him in the eye. She said, "Did you enjoy the party?" Kevin nodded. "I like parties. My sister says she gets 2 birthdays a year because I'm such a pain in the butt, so she gets mine." He grinned. "But she don't mean it, because she always takes me to the show for my birthday and I get the biggest bag of popcorn." He looked up from his bagging and said, "I love my sister." The woman blinked back tears. Kevin was only 12 inches from her, and he was a real live human being now, and she didn't even want to escape him any longer. She touched his hand and said, "I'm certain that she loves you too." "Yep, that's why I get the biggest bag of popcorn." Radical hospitality has the potential to foster wonderful connections, to enrich our lives as nothing else can, to work miracles, to transform our world. It's not a gimmick, but an act of faith, of commitment to practice positive regard and caring from the heart. It's a discipline we practice over and over and over and over again. And what might the implications be for the future of this community? Radical hospitality is about paying attention to the little things: how clean the entry is, how clear the signs are, that everyone has the words to the songs, that we're using gender inclusive language, that there's enough toilet paper and paper towels in the bathroom, that the greeter table looks inviting. And even more, radical hospitality is about paying attention to the big things, that we approach one another with inner openness and positive regard, that we practice compassion, patience, and active listening, that we strive to accept others where they are, as we ourselves long to be accepted. Who needs our hospitality? Each and every one of us, and hundreds of strangers who will come through our doors in the months and years ahead. May we cultivate our own deepest impulses to show these strangers the kind of radical hospitality that will invite them to consider staying around, becoming friends, making this their spiritual home. So may it always be. Shalom, blessed be, inshallah, aho, shanti, amen.